Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the February 21st Cuyahoga County Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page.
Oh, okay.
Calling the roll for Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Ms. Simon.
Here.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
You have a quorum, and let the record reflect that Mr. Sweeney, Councilmember Sweeney, is also in attendance.
Welcome, Mr. Sweeney. Do we have public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, there's no one signed in for public comment.
Thank you. In your packets, you have the meeting minutes of January 17th. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion and a second.
I'll make a motion.
Second, Conwell.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Thank you. 2023-0024.
Resolution 2023-0024, awarding a total sum not to exceed $8,000 to the City of Fairview Park for the Evolis Radar Speed Sign Project from the District 1 ARPA Community Grant Fund.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fairview Park has a number of...
Excuse me, can you state your name for the record, please?
Oh, sure. My name is Chief Paul Shepard, City of Fairview Park Division of Police.
Thank you.
So Fairview Park is a predominantly residential community. In our 60 some odd miles, we have 4 state routes that go east and west. All of our north and south and the remainder are all residential areas. Like with all residential areas that border Cleveland, we have a lot of traffic that cuts through, in addition to our 17,000 residents that live in the city. One of the things that we always get a large number of complaints are for people who are violating the speed or just the sheer amount of traffic cutting through during different hours, school zone violations, things like that. We currently have a 22-year-old speed trailer that basically we put it out on the roadway and it will display speed. We have one stealth radar system that we can put out in trouble areas. The problem is the last couple of years we've been inundated with complaints of aggressive driving, speeders. Our officers go out, do special attention. However, we feel that through Elon City, we have a program where we could get 2 speed radar signs that would not only display the speed, but also record the speed. We think that in conjunction with our existing speed trailer and our special attentions, that we'd be able to, one, reduce accidents in our city, and 2, sort of give the residents peace of mind, let them know that we're here, and give the drivers a friendly warning that what the speed limit is to keep our citizens safe.
Any questions? Anything further? Yes, sir.
If I could just make a comment. With these signs being able to record the speeds over a period of time where they're located, gives the police department data where they can put up traffic details if needed. If there's particular areas that they see they have a consistent amount of violations on those streets, and the majority of those streets are residential, it would be a good tool for the police.
Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair to Chief Paul Shepard. I'm sorry, I apologize if you stated, are these temporary?
So they have the flexibility where we could put it as a static sign where it would stay there for months on end, or we have the ability to move it from place to place depending on the need.
Okay, is this an equipment that you would own to use for future
It is
use?
equipment we would own and we'd utilize throughout the city.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further?
I can add my
Yes, ma'am.
name to this, Mr. Chair. Another
ma'am.
good use of ARPA dollars.
Yeah, I'd like to add my name as well.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Add mine.
Seems as though the committee would like their names added, ma'am. So we can all be vilified in the plain dealer for doing such things. As she smiles over there. Hi. How you doing? Okay, if we're in order here, if there's no further discussion, I'll accept a motion for Resolution 2023-0024 to the full council for second reading.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Kelly, I thought you would be doing.
Second?
Got a motion and a second, Mr. Kelly and then Mr. Tuma. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Resolution 2023-0025, awarding a total sum not to exceed $28,850 to the City of Lyndhurst for the purpose of procuring an all-hazards command rehab vehicle from the District 11 ARPA Community Grant Fund.
Chair, Council. Mike Carroll with Lyndhurst Fire Department, Fire Chief. Also present with me is Mayor Patrick Ward and Fire Chief John Frazier of Pepper Pike Fire Department. So the purposes of our, we made application in 2020 for an Assistance to Firefighters grant for an all-hazards command rehab vehicle in the county. It was this collective effort between multiple agencies across the county. It was done on behalf of the Cuyahoga County Fire Chiefs. The total project cost was $560,000. The grant covered from the Assistance to Firefighters grant covered about $450,000. We got a match from the county for $50,000. They do an annual AFG match as it is. The county fire chiefs collectively voted to fund this project because it was such a needed project that we identified. Furthermore, we were able to obtain some funding from UASI funds, Urban Area Security Initiative funds, that was allowable under this, including LEPC. So the $28,850 will finish the build out of the vehicle. So when we receive it, we can put it fully in service, and it will serve all of Cuyahoga County, all the public agencies across the county, fire, EMS, and police if they need it, including our regional teams, Region 2 USAR, Region 2 Water, and Region 2 Hazmat. So the primary purpose is to support a strong incident command on larger scale incidents, including first responder rehab, on-scene rehab. It will also work in connectivity with the Sugarland Valley dispatch vehicle. It's not the same thing. They have a communications truck. This has a very specific role outside of that, but we can tether both vehicles together to support a large-scale incident. So we did not want to duplicate, this is not a duplicate project at all. It's one that will marry together very well.
Ms. Simon?
Has any comments, but I want to commend the mayor and the chief and the leadership coming out of Lyndhurst to really have a vision for regionalization, collaboration. You really should, be on a map to show this is how it's done, Lyndhurst, and I appreciate that so much. And just the focus on safety and security of your residents is very evident to me, and I appreciate your good stewardship of this taxpayer money coming through ARPA.
We do appreciate the support.
Thank you.
And as for my colleagues' support, and please, our fire chief from Pepper Pike, thank you for being here too as a collaborator.
Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair, to Mr. Mike. Wanted to know, and forgive me for my ignorance, what exactly does a rehab vehicle do?
Well, so when the firefighters or emergency personnel are on scene, it will have water capabilities, have misting capabilities. It will be area where fire crews can get warmed up during inclement weather or get cooled down during hot weather. So some long duration operations, unfortunately, the one that just recently occurred in Oak would be a perfect example where this vehicle could be on scene supporting those crews that are operating there for an extended period of time. So it's initial rehab operations. There's additional resources we would call in to help support that, but it's going to support the crews that are operating on scene for long duration incidents.
Okay, and one follow-up question. What is the life of this type of vehicle?
The useful life of this vehicle is expected to be 20 to 25 years. And also understand that the Cuyahoga County Fire Chiefs Association will take on the ongoing maintenance and the other costs going forward on this vehicle. It will have communication capabilities to talk through all three radio systems. So regardless of where it operates in the system, we could operate on the Cleveland system, the Mark system, and the Parma system. So it was important that it could function anywhere within the county for any of the specialty teams or rescue teams in the county, or fire departments and or law enforcement if needed.
Okay, so when you talk about sharing the vehicle all around the county, this kind of vehicle is only used in like special...
Larger scale incidents primarily, but again, it would be housed centrally located in the county as much as possible. So initially it would be in Pepper Pike or Lyndhurst just to complete the outfit of it. We're looking to put it possibly in the EMA's Public Works Garage. We've had discussions with them, and then Cuyahoga Heights Fire Department, their fire chief has offered to be the primary responder to it so we can get there in a timely fashion, because it makes the most sense to have it centrally located. But again, it would be used for larger scale incidents.
Okay, and so I'm sure you guys are working out a protocol if another city needs it or...
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything further?
I move,
Yes, ma'am.
make a motion that this resolution be moved to the next full council meeting with a recommendation of passage for second reading.
Second, Conwell.
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Against?
Mr. Chair, can I have my name added?
Yes,
since it's
ma'am,
being
if you would.
used for the whole county, and I hope that includes City of
Would
Cleveland.
imagine.
Absolutely.
Maybe add the committee, please.
If you please add my name, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
gentlemen.
you, Chair. Thank you, Council.
Good
Much
luck.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2023-0003, amending Section 202.07 of the Cuyahoga County Code to clarify the reporting of the county's sheriff.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trevor's going to present the technical recommendations.
Good afternoon, council members. Trevor McAleer, County Council staff. I wanted to provide the committee with a brief history of the county charter and county code regarding the sheriff's office before we get into the proposed ordinance. If the council members that were here recall, prior to November 2019, the sheriff's section, including the powers and duties of the sheriff, was in Article 5 of the county charter. And the sheriff's department was further defined in Section 202.07 of the Cuyahoga County Code. Then in November 2019, the voters passed a charter amendment to move the sheriff's section of the county charter to Article 16. The charter amendment mainly did three things. First, it added 2 additional qualifications of the sheriff, which included a post-secondary degree and a certification from a law enforcement or correctional association as listed in the charter. The charter amendment then created a fixed 4-year term for the sheriff beginning January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2024. Finally, the charter amendment added a removal provision before the expiration of the term by a vote of 8 members of council, which prior to November 2019, the county sheriff served at the pleasure of the county executive. The ordinance before the committee today proposes 3 changes to section 202.07 of the Cuyahoga County Code. 2 of those changes are technical in nature, and the other addresses the reporting structure of the sheriff. I will present the 2 technical changes, and Councilman Sweeney will address the proposed reporting structure. The first technical change renames the section, the title of the section from the Sheriff's Department to the Sheriff and the Sheriff's Department, as to outline the reporting structure of the sheriff. The second technical change was a recommendation from our law department back in 2021 when this was first discussed at the Committee of the Whole regarding the confirmation process of Sheriff Violin. They suggested that we simply add the language that the sheriff is responsible for fulfilling all obligations and duties of the county charter, county code, and general law, which is added there at the end of section 207.07A. If there are no further questions on the technical changes, I believe Councilman Sweeney is going to come down and discuss the reporting structure of the sheriff.
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Chairman and council members, first, Mr. Chairman, thank you for adding this to the agenda. I'd like to thank Trevor for putting it together with me, and I want to recognize our interim sheriff, Sheriff Griner's in the room. As you know,
And before you
I'm
start,
sorry.
I'm remiss, Clerk Byrd / Safety Director Byrd, and we have the presence of the Chief of Staff, so.
Thank you, Councilman Gallagher. I'm remiss that Councilman Sweeney did not recognize me.
I was about to. He cut me off at the very end.
I think I stepped on his toes, but I wanted to get there first, it's
Oh,
the
this is killing me.
West Side Irish thing, Thank you. Well, thank you for being here. Go
I think
ahead,
it's
sir.
more of an Ed Ignatius thing, to be honest with you. But anyways, first, thank you. And one of my first council meetings, which was via Zoom, and we were doing the confirmation of Sheriff Violin at the time, I asked the question, who do you report to? And if Ricky would show the video, everybody on the committee got the full video for an hour and a half of the discussion, but I just want to highlight 2 important thresholds that got me to this point. Yes, through the chair. So basically, direct communication from a council member, you're going to be very responsive, but just with the chain of command, right? You're the sheriff.
Mhm.
Who would the chain of command be for you, if there is one?
Okay, so during the application process and in my discussions with various different groups in the executive and his office, it was described to me that the chain of command, the person that I immediately report to is Chief of Public Safety Corey. And through the Chief of Public Safety, I report up through that chain of command to the executive.
Yes, through the chair. So basically, direct communication from a council member, you're going to be very responsive, but just with the chain of command, right? You're the sheriff.
Mhm.
Who would the chain of command be for you, if there is one? They're repeating.
Okay, so during the application process and in my discussions with various different groups in the executive and his office, it was described to me that the chain of command, the person that I immediately report to is Chief of Public Safety Corey. And through the Chief of Public Safety, I report up through that chain of command to the executive.
We're waiting for the second one, so it was a repeat. I apologize for that.
It's fair, but I would say that it's not a completely autonomous position. If it was completely autonomous, it would be an elected position. And it's my experience in working at a lower level with a mayor council situation where I was an appointment by a mayor.
Got it.
However, I didn't serve at the mayor's discretion. I could not be removed without the majority of council's vote. So that while I worked for the mayor and she was my direct report, she couldn't terminate me without council's approval and direction. And this is a very analogous situation. It's fair.
So those, Mr. Chairman, to the council members or the committee members, the question is, we have the responsibility of removing the sheriff. And right now, I don't know the reporting structure. And I created this piece of legislation to put the reporting structure in, and is my suggestion that it reports directly to the executive. And I believe it's raises to the level of a cabinet position, from my perspective. It is has a budget of 135 million, and it has 1,040 full-time equivalent employees. So I wake up some days and say, should I recommend that the sheriff be fired? And I don't really have anybody to ask the question. And the one entity that, if we keep it the way it is, when we're having our most serious tragic situations at the jail, when the U.S. Marshals came in, they did an extensive interview or extensive review. They identified as inhumane, and that was the most information I ever had. And if that's the situation, the question should be, should the sheriff be fired because of that? So that's it in a nutshell. I'll answer any questions if you want to get deep into this. And who does the sheriff report to? Still the question.
Questions from the committee?
I have questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, of the Director Byrd, because what I just saw is a video of interpretation, a subjective interpretation of how the reporting is from a former sheriff. And as I understand how things sit here now, is the sheriff reports to the executive. So I'm not sure why we need to clarify that. The executive's able to designate directors with whom they may report, but I wanted to hear from actually the administration to see what their structure is, because really I don't see much relevance in a former administration or a former sheriff telling me what a structure is today. So through the chair, if I can, to the administration.
First time. Through the chair to the Councilwoman, and again, my name is Eric Webster. I'm the Chief of Staff in the Executive Office, and Deputy Chief of Staff Byrd should feel free to jump in and supplement. The answer to your question is absolutely. County Executive Ronayne does intend for the sheriff to report directly to his office. To the extent that we are utilizing a Deputy Chief of Staff system for direct reports, it is a liaison, so that day-to-day things that don't rise to the level of needing the executive, there is someone that can be a support system to the sheriff. But the posting that just went out last week that was tied to the announcement of Sheriff Greiner as the interim did directly put the position as reporting to the county executive with an ability to have a designee as well. But this will be a direct report to the county executive. So.
Okay, so I appreciate the council colleague bringing this forward, but I don't see that there needs to be any further language about the reporting. I do, I guess, appreciate the recommendation of the law department. If they want to extend the obligation and duties vested in the sheriff and want to expand that, I don't have a problem with that. So, but I don't see the necessity of forcing, what defines a county executive. That's pretty much what this is. And so we would have to go back to every ordinance and start to sort out and micromanage how that structure is going to be administered and put forth. So I don't see a point in this other than thank you for allowing us to review an important aspect of our government.
Chairman? Yes, sir.
Can I respond, if you don't mind? Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my colleague, I haven't absolute different opinion of this. And I believe we have the power to remove is the power to direct. That's what I've learned doing my due diligence here. And it has to do with some Supreme Court cases. So we're the removing entity. So put it in the legislation. So a new executive comes in, they can't change it.
I'm sorry, if I can expand on what Supreme Court ruling and how does that apply to this discussion?
Michael King, can you help me? Because we have the power to remove,
We know that.
and if
It's
we
in the
have the
charter.
power to remove,
Yes.
we have the power to direct. That's what I learned during my due diligence during this important piece of legislation.
But we already have directed through the chair that the executive will be the reporting entity.
Did you want the clarification?
I guess on what I want to understand how the Supreme Court, what Supreme Court, Ohio, US, what are we talking about?
Yes, thank you, Michael King, council staff. Basically, this concept came up in discussion in relation to presidential appointment and removal powers. And I think the sort of constitutional and the charter situations are analogous in that the power to appoint and the power to remove are inherent and usually in the executive branch for cabinet level positions. But there are certain administrative agencies like the Federal Trade Commission, Federal Communications Commission, where only the legislative body has the power to remove. And those are considered more independent administrative agencies where the president doesn't have removal power. And so, you know, that concept that Councilman Sweeney mentioned, I think really is born out of the constitutional principles that came up, I believe it was in Myers and Humphrey U.S. Supreme Court cases dealing with administrative law.
I guess stay up. I still am, I'm still perplexed by, I understand we have the power to remove. I understand the federal structure. I understand it's in our charter. It's embedded in there that we have the power to remove. What relevance does this have? Because what this proposal is doing is forcing trying to define an executive office and how that office is going to be structured. Whether the are we going to micromanage the executive? This is what this is to me, is to micromanage the executive office. And what benefit and why should we be doing that? Is Byrd, our Director Byrd, not sufficient to allow a sheriff to report to on a minor infraction or minor issue? Are we saying that can't happen? And if so, why? If you don't want that, then why?
The question that we're discussing right now is who the sheriff reports to. After we had the hearing, every one of the council colleagues that just talked about it made a statement of they have to be autonomous. They report to nobody. That's what our charter says. And I'm just trying to clarify it, that the reporting goes to executive, so we have somebody that we can say, what's the status of it? And
what's the status of what, through the chair?
how's the sheriff doing? Should we terminate him today?
Okay, so I don't understand. We already say it's the executive. And you're saying the executive can never have a liaison or somebody with whom a sheriff can ask a question? Are you saying that the only communication channel a sheriff must have is only to the executive instead of the executive office? And somehow it's a very separate issue when we're talking autonomy. That's not relevant. And not all council members believe that that's necessary. I want to be able to clarify that. But what you're saying, Councilman Sweeney, is you want to say that the sheriff cannot speak to, report to, discuss, hypothesize with anyone other than the person of the executive, other than the executive office. And I'm saying to my colleagues that creates a huge problem with every executive office, whether it's overseeing public works, whatever department that is somehow we're trying to change what the definition of the executive office is. And I'm going to yield through the chair to Councilman Tuma, who has something to say. Those are my comments, but thank you so much for bringing this to us.
All right, I appreciate it. So just to clarify, I mean, I guess my question is as far as the sheriff's office goes, how would the sheriff reporting to the county executive be any different from any other director?
Because we have the ability to fire, we have the responsibility, the sole responsibility to terminate and remove the sheriff. Every other director serves at the pleasure of the executive. That's and because of that.
So, but isn't the sheriff, I mean, it's my understanding that the sheriff continues to serve at the pleasure of the executive. This is more analogous, instead of using a Supreme Court decision, I would make it more analogous to a mayor and city council situation as the former sheriff.
I'm going to keep pushing back a little bit. The charter amendment that was placed on the ballot by this council says the county executive does not have the authority to remove, does not serve at the pleasure. It is up to council. And this council, the sheriff could actually say, right now, I'm reporting to nobody. And if this council says...
Yeah, I disagree with that. I disagree with that assessment. I mean, listen, if we're talking about looking at analogies to the Constitution and things like that, there are enumerated powers in the Constitution and there are implied powers in the Constitution. I'm saying in this instance, it would be implied that the county executive has authority over the sheriff. The buck stops with the county executive, with the sheriff.
How does that make sense if the sheriff cannot be fired by the executive?
Preventing a sheriff from being fired by a county executive, it's a safety valve. It's a protection to allow better autonomy for the sheriff. It allows the sheriff to say, hey, I can act and make decisions, and if I think what I was doing was a fair decision or something that I believe in, then we'll have a public hearing about it, and we'll see if council agrees with the executive. It doesn't preclude the executive from firing the sheriff. If the council agrees with him, it's just a check and balance.
The charter specifically says it only can be removed by vote of 8 council members. So the executive cannot fire the sheriff.
He can start the process.
He could start the process.
Yeah. And that's a procedural due process.
And that's why I want him to report, he could report to, I just want to report to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, he does report to the county executive
Your
like any other
opinion.
director.
I just want to put it in the legislation through the chair. I apologize. That's all I'm trying to do, is get I think there's a loop, or
but here's
a hole here.
Mr. Gallagher, can I ask a So through the chair, so my only concern with this is kind of what Councilwoman Simon was alluding to. Are you maybe you're not, and maybe you can explain this. With respect to shall report directly, are you saying that there can't be communication between a go-between, a liaison
Not at all.
between?
The report to the county executive say, hi, I'm going to give it to my director of safety. She's going to do all the work and have all the daily interactions.
So how is that any different than what has occurred in the past, though?
Mr. Through the chair, of what it says now, more importantly, it already says that,
What does it say?
that the sheriff reports to the executive
Where's that set? Where's that stated at?
in the structure and the charter.
What was the question?
Okay, I'm sorry. I just,
Yeah, but where does
I'll come back to.
Where is it stated at? In the charter that it says the sheriff reports to the executive. I couldn't find it.
In the old charter and in the new charter, it doesn't, other than in the old charter, under 501, it said the sheriff shall serve at the pleasure of the county executive.
Absolutely.
When that was changed, that was removed. Probably not the best thing to do. The power to remove can be the executive come in here today and say, I want the sheriff fired. We'll have a hearing, and if 8 people up here agree, he's fired.
Absolutely.
If 8 people don't agree, if a council person says, I want the sheriff fired, and ask for a hearing, and there's without the executive, the executive could argue the opposite. But if 8 people up here say you're gone, you're gone. I think that was the intent.
Just on that point, I'm sorry.
I do understand the problem here, because we're dealing with implied
I want to take the implied out.
language. But I personally would take it a step further and say, once the sheriff is appointed or nominated by the executive and confirmed by the council, that he or she would have all the powers vested in that position through the state of Ohio and its laws. At that point, you have an independent sheriff as best we're going to get without an election. It's the only way. There's two ways to do it. Elect the sheriff or put that language in to our charter, and that's a charter change.
I'm good with either one.
If we're going to do
But
something.
through the chair, we have county charter, county code, general law. That doesn't include Ohio law?
It's already in there.
It's already in there.
There's nothing in 1601 that says that the sheriff of Cuyahoga County.
A sheriff's allowed to act within Ohio law.
It's-
That's implied.
a
You
sheriff-
guys got to understand what implied powers are here, guys.
But can he?
Yeah,
Yes.
Give you an example.
absolutely.
And I've
Why don't
been
we bring our
It's his
lawyer up?
duty.
And
It's his-
I've been waiting to give this example. And actually, this led up to why we're here today discussing this, because it was a mess. The original framers of this had no idea what they were talking about, brought no legal experts in as far as law enforcement. I checked it. Nobody's opinion was brought in. This was a bunch of people getting together, oh, let's do something. Well, to do something got us a mess, and the mess was the appointed sheriff. And
I agree.
we are now we're in year 12, month 2, 10 sheriffs with the next sheriff. Look up the definition of insanity. I present that to anyone. But what happened was the sheriff, as they came in, really didn't know who to answer to. But they were terrified before 1601. They were terrified that they could be let go at any moment, because that's exactly what happened to Bob Reed and Mr. Fitzgerald. That's why that sent the message. That sent a chilling message to anybody coming in as sheriff of Cuyahoga County under this new charter, which was a mess. Which is why we changed things. I don't know if this has helped out at all, but maybe in some ways it has, in some ways it hasn't. But let me give you the example of exactly what I had to deal with, that I couldn't talk about because of a lawsuit, and a man that went to prison on my testimony. So I got a little skin in the game here. Cliff Pinckney was the sheriff. I kept telling Cliff, I've known Cliff 30 years. Cliff, you're the sheriff. Be the sheriff. Run the show. Be the man. You have control of this. He said, Mike, I don't. Left it at that. I said, well, you got Ken Mills running all over Hades here, talking behind your back and doing things. I see it, but I'm not in a position to direct you. Either you're going to stand up and be the sheriff or you're not. He goes, well, I ordered Ken Mills not to leave the jail or the Justice Center without my knowledge. And if he did, I want to know where he was at and who he was meeting with and what it was about. I said, good, that's a good step. Not a week later, I'm in the executive suite, and I look over at the chief of staff's office, and I'm like, there's Ken Mills. I called Cliff. Hey, Ken, where's Ken Mills at? He's in the jail. No, he's not. He's right here. He's right here. And at that point, he told me the most important thing that any sheriff could tell me. He goes, Mike, I have no control. I have nowhere to turn. I answer to an executive who has decided to put this man in charge of my jail. This formula doesn't work. Hasn't worked, will not work. I don't care who is the sheriff. They will always be looking over their back. And we all throw the word autonomous around. Until we truly make it autonomous, by putting some clause in here that protects that individual for at least a 4-year period, or from being fired with 8 votes up here, and then the executive probably wanting, if a sheriff gets fired with 8 votes up here and an executive wanting a guy gone, or a gal gone, it's going to happen. Something terrible happened. Well, I can tell you the past 12 years, terrible things have happened. And the only thing we changed was this, and all it is on removal. And we're talking with implied. Maybe we should have done a better job. I think, I didn't vote for this. I was the only one that voted no.
I know.
I'm looking pretty good today.
You look good all the time,
I
by the
know.
way.
Oh, boy. I would like to
But again,
comment,
we're
Mr. Chair, when you're
talking
done.
autonomous, and that's the perfect example of what these sheriffs are dealing with.
Okay, Mr.
I want to
Chair,
respond.
when you're ready.
And
this was put
I
to
just
a
wanted to
vote.
put that on
Yeah.
the table for you.
Okay,
Go
can I
ahead.
respond?
Our amendment was supported overwhelmingly by
Exactly.
the people. So
Mr.
that's a
Chair.
good thing.
Absolutely.
People
It
matter.
was supported overwhelmingly.
Yeah, people matter.
I was the only no vote.
Right.
I know
And
it.
again, 12 years, 2 months, 10 sheriffs.
understand.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
One sec. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my colleague, I couldn't find in the charter that he reports directly to the
Okay.
executive.
I'm
If you
trying to
have
go
it.
back. Okay, so what we're doing in this committee is what I anticipated what would happen is that we have something very specific to which we are addressing.
Mm-hmm.
However, I knew we would morph into all these other issues. And
I'm trying to
I
keep
think,
it-
I think I first want to address what's on the table, and then I'm going to address what my chair Gallagher stated. First of all, Article 3, Section 3.092 of our charter actually says that the departments are under supervision of the county executive. And that means to me that the executive is overseeing that department. Now, do we have to be specific about saying report to the office versus the man or woman? I don't have a problem necessarily with that, but I have a problem with micromanaging how the executive sets up the structure. So this is here, it's in Article 3, it's there, the supervising authority is the executive. So it is there, Councilman, but if for some reason we think we really have to put something in there about the office of the executive, that's a different question. Now, because we're morphing into the topic really at the table, I think really is whether we want to amend this charter and make this an elected position. I first want to say that the people who came together to form this charter included former Director Bill Mason. Bill Mason has a lot of knowledge about the criminal justice system and sheriffs and law enforcement. So I want to just correct that no one in that room knew what they were talking about. And today we have the prosecutor giving his input, so somehow we think that's relevant, but I want to just for the record say Bill Mason was a prosecutor as well. In terms of Sheriff Pinckney, I want to bring the history back here. He had nowhere to go. Repeatedly, I guess there were conversations between the chair and Mr. Pinckney. Please tell us what's going on. Not once did the sheriff stand up at that podium to tell council what was going on. Was he so scared about his job that he couldn't stand up here? Well, he shouldn't be the sheriff if he's that scared. The problem is the man, not how we have this structured, in my opinion. I subpoenaed Sheriff Pinckney to come and talk about this. He cowered and would not speak. So, at that point, he knew he didn't have a job. He still wouldn't speak. So I really want to point these things out. And if we want to go to an elected sheriff, guess what? The pool of applicants gets very, very small. We have one party ruling this county. I'm proud to be part of that party. But that party does not have an abundance of qualified sheriffs within Cuyahoga County that would be able to rise to the level of a sheriff qualification that we are seeking and that we set forth in the charter amendments. The way to find a qualified sheriff is to expand that pool, and it wouldn't be by making this elected. And that is the bottom line. So if we're going to get into conversations about that, which I'm sure our chair wants to do, I'll be happy to participate. But right now in front of us is a language change that unless my colleagues beg to differ, I don't see necessarily that this matters because of the supervision and all inherent powers. But if we want to put something in here that there's a report to the executive, not the person. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you for letting me go on.
Absolutely. But I would highly recommend that you talk to Mr. Mason, who was against this during those discussions, and on his
bring him
way
in.
out as Mr. Budish's chief of staff, I asked him the history of how that happened, and I would highly recommend you talk to Bill about that. It's an interesting story, and if true, well, I'll leave it to your discretion when you find out the truth on how it showed up. I didn't know that. I didn't know the truth, and I got it from Bill's, but he was against it. And Sheriff Pinckney, you're right. Every sheriff that has come in here, every single sheriff, we have told, whatever you need, please come to us. And they didn't. And it's not that, I don't know if they they all seem to be walking on eggshells. That's how I perceived it. I couldn't understand it, I don't understand it, and I never will, quite honestly. So that's where we're at. But what's in front of us today, and that's a discussion for a later date, but please talk to Mr. Mason. Maybe that'll swing you my way.
It's going to take a lot more than that, Mr. Chair.
I understand that. But anyhow, so where we're at today, it sounds like what I'm hearing here is that people here feel is implied that not just implied now with the example that in a different section of the charter, that the sheriff is a director of that division who answers to the executive. This is not neat, I don't think. I think it could possibly be cleaned up a little bit better. I don't see it necessarily important to memorialize it in legislation. I think it's very important to memorialize it in the charter. And the only way to do that is to go to the ballot and change the charter. And is it worth that to change what we already know that's in the charter by what it says as far as director heads? Because the sheriff is part of the administration's directors. I don't like it, but it is what it is.
But, okay, I don't agree. I just want to tidy it up. Supervision's not direct report. And report is defined two different ways. Tell them what's happening is a report, and directly report because you are under him in the supervision chain. When I heard the colleagues that talked about it, not everybody said, they were adamant that the reporting structure not be the executive. And that caused me to say, well then, who does he report to? My conclusion, mine, is the executive. I just am trying to understand who the sheriff reports to.
By charter,
By charter, it says supervision. There's no word in it that says report to. And this is a very unique situation. We have two entities. We have the IG and we have the sheriff.
Councilwoman, could you read that section again?
Article 3, Section 3.092, Cuyahoga County Charter provides council with the power to establish departments and divisions and sections within departments under the supervision of the county executive. Basically, that's what it says. So the question is whether supervision would, by definition, include that's the person or department to whom the sheriff would report.
With the charter change that occurred after that was written.
No, this gives a blanket supervisory authority of the executive over departments. It's already there, but with or without the amendment later.
I just said the amendment was created after that language was created. That's all I was saying. I didn't question it.
But that is still in the charter, so it doesn't, the 16 doesn't change that.
Right.
Whatever, I'm just trying, I think it's.
Why don't we do this? Because obviously it seems we're not on the same page. Let's set this aside. We could talk this through. I personally think if you want that sort of language, it should be in the charter and not legislatively, because legislatively, the charter rules. The charter's going to beat any legislation that we have. And that language would just be buffering that language as far as I could see. I have never once thought that the sheriff or any other director answered to anyone but the executive. It's never crossed my mind, other than when we had.
Did we look at that video?
And you're talking to a guy that came in here cold, that had no idea of what was going on, and no disrespect to him. He was told, here's the way it is, evidently, and if you play that further, everybody on that screen blew up. Right? Like, what are you talking about? I mean, if we extend that, it was not pretty.
But what were they blowing up about?
Because he didn't know what he was talking about.
He said very specifically, he reported to the safety
Exactly.
director, to Bill,
I think if you
to
plan-
Armin,
I think
and
if
we
you-
all said, no way.
Right, and if you
And now
point-
we're saying it's okay and it's implied, and we had to go through all that?
I,
I'm
Mr.
confused
that was
a little
just
bit.
one individual.
That's how it's structured
And-
right now.
And that's when,
Are we all-
because I think everybody in that video was under the impression
Mm-hmm.
answers to the executive. And that's why we went, and I bet you and I don't recall
It
what
all
I said, but I bet
autonomous,
you-
autonomous,
autonomous,
no executive.
I bet you, if you.
Let's
if
watch
you-
it. We
if
got an
you
hour
go
and a
to my
half.
comments, I'm like, who told you
So,
this?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
So just to clarify, autonomous was a huge component of what we were trying to do with respect to providing more autonomy for the sheriff. So that sounds like a, so an important key component of that was getting the sheriff to understand that as far as day-to-day operations go in the sheriff's, in the jail, the sheriff was in charge of day-to-day operations because of what had occurred with Mr. Gallagher's good friend over in the jail during that time period. So we were on a heightened sense of making sure that the sheriff understood, hey, you know, if there is a safety issue or if there's an X number of COs that have to be here during a certain period of time, that's your decision. That's not some layperson's decision, is what we were trying to get at. And that's ultimately what we're talking about with autonomy. Now, with respect to reporting, ultimately, it's the county executive's appointment. And like any appointment that the county executive has, he or she is responsible. The buck stops with the county executive on the appointment, on the responsibility. If there's a screw up by the sheriff, it's on the county executive. If there's an issue in the jail, you know, and it's caused by the sheriff, it's on the county executive. I mean, the sheriff's going to, you know, have his or her share of blame, but, or you know, congratulations if something great happens. It's on the county executive. And that's ultimately what I think our colleagues understand the position to be. I understand what you're trying to do here. I'm not as opposed to putting it in some kind of writing saying that, if that clarifies it for some colleagues.
All I'm trying to do is get
If you
it
spoke to some colleagues who
clarified.
don't have an
and
understanding
why
of that.
can't we do it if we're just going to clarify something that's everybody agrees with?
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Tuma, to Councilman Sweeney, I'm still not clear, though, because what you have, the video you showed, and I just heard you say that this is how it's structured, why were people outraged now and but not now, then but not now. Well, it appears that the outrage occurred because of former Sheriff Violent's inability to articulate to whom he specifically reports, whether it's a liaison, whether it's Bill May, former Director Mason, or whether in this case it would be Director Byrd. That is the issue you've brought before us, is the distinction between whether that sheriff has to go and speak directly to the executive, or if it's the office liaison or director to whom he would speak, or she. So that's the issue. That's the narrow issue in front of us, and it's nothing other than that. So really the question is, if we have to define, add something on to what supervision means, or, you know, whether this is a sheriff must report to either an office of the executive, or in Mr. Councilman Sweeney's case, seemed to be outraged that the reporting was going to the director rather than the executive. That is the issue you're bringing before us. I say that it's the office of the executive.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good
So
with that.
what's before us, the issue is clear.
Who do they
we need-
report to?
Whether the reporting entity would be the executive office, and it seems Councilman Sweeney is okay with the office versus whether it's a director or liaison. And now Councilman Gallagher, Chair, is asking whether this needs to go to a charter change, or whether Councilman Tuma says we could just put it in writing that sheriff reports to the executive office. Now, do we need to do that for every department? That's the problem I have. And this other issue about, well, we have to do it here because we can remove, that doesn't carry weight with me at all. Because if there's ambiguity here, you're addressing some inherent power, some Supreme Court case. That's not the issue.
I'm just going
What the
with Mike
issue
said.
is that you said it's confusing, that people don't know to whom they report. So that would be the same across the board. if that's the issue we're addressing. It's not different because we can remove. You can make some ambiguous argument about that. But if we're going to do it here, we better do it everywhere.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you. I'm just, I'd be okay with doing it with every department that council has the authority to remove. And there's two. So that's my comment. And I'm just going
To go to
on that one?
strengthen your argument is that you would broad brush all directors.
No, because we don't have the ability to remove them.
I'm not including that. I'm answering to the executive.
Right.
I'm not concerned about removal. Your only concern is who
Who the sheriff reports.
the sheriff, who is a director,
No, he's the sheriff.
who is covered under that section, but to strengthen your argument, you should say all directors.
No, I'm not. I'm very laser focused on the
Well,
entities.
it is that, though. It is,
That's micromanaging. I don't want to micromanage.
no. Well,
What?
That's what Councilwoman Simon is
No, no,
arguing.
except for these two. I'm trying to be very specific and narrow.
Define the second one, the sheriff and who? Who's the second? one?
Alexa, the IG,
The IG.
Inspector General. And in the charter, it says she must have 2 reports posted online on the website. And I have the privilege of overseeing or having the chairmanship that oversees and has the reports twice a year. And I go down regularly, unannounced, announced, see how things are going. And if I find anything out, I'll be more than happy to share with my colleagues and we'll make a decision. But it is running absolutely extraordinarily well.
Mr. Chair, that has nothing to do with the point in discussion, whether it's going well.
It has very much in
Just
point.
answering the question.
It has
Yes,
2
ma'am.
people.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
through the chair to Mr. Sweeney. So I just, I just want to be clear. I think I'm on the same conversation as Councilwoman Simon. You put in here in bold that you want change the words, "The sheriff shall report directly to the county executive." So my question to you, does it specifically have to be to the county executive, or can it be to someone that the county executive deems
Absolutely.
he wants that reporting to?
I just need somebody to tell me who the sheriff reports to. If we as a body decide it's,
But it doesn't matter. So you
we
could
can
add those-
amend this.
You could
This
add
is
the
starting the
words on there
conversation.
that you would like, that would be implied, because Chief of Staff Wobser just stated that, in their minds, it would determine what is brought to the level of the need to be specifically to be sat down in front of Chris Ronayne. So Chris Ronayne, we all understand, has multiple things to do. So so I just want to get clear from you, if this is what you want or you don't want. If he determines that Nayla Bird is the person that will directly hear those maybe minor or whatever things to her, then she will directly bring that to, are you okay with that?
I am
or you're
100%
not?
okay. This is the legislative process. I brought a piece of legislation up, and it's bolded because it's only a change. I'm not super emphasizing it. The language that is changed is normally bolded or underlined.
But I think it goes back to, it's stated already in Article 3 that supervision of the county executive. So it's just wordsmithing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to the point where I'm going to keep repeating
I'm okay,
myself.
but I just think it needs just hearing to clarify what you are trying to get us to do. If you
I can't be more clear than that. I'm trying to get
So it
in our
says to the
charter,
county
on our charter
exec.
code, some language that says very specifically who
It says the county exec. The sheriff shall report directly to the county exec.
no, absolutely, we can amend it. This is my opinion. We have 10 other wonderful colleagues that I will just try to get my question answered. And if it's the director of safety, I am fine with that. But it's so contrary to the hearing that we had. I didn't hear one word during that hearing regarding, it was about autonomy, and not one person said it should be the executive. I watched it twice. Not one person said it should be the executive. I'm cool with people changing their minds or going in that direction. I'm just looking for the question of who does the sheriff report to? And for 2 years, I've been asking that question. And I've been told by some of my colleagues in the leadership, it's okay, it's working well. For me, I just want some definition in our county code that says who the sheriff reports to. It could be us. It could be the marshals. It could be the director, the chief of staff, the executive. But the person they're reporting to has to have the resources to oversee.
So through the chair, to you, Mr. Sweeney, in your mind, it does not or has not been occurring because it's not written in there that the sheriff reports directly to the county executive.
No, I don't know who he's reporting to. I just don't know.
Okay, so you want us to, and I agree with Councilman Gallagher, Chair Gallagher, that a legislative change is not it's effective, but if we're going to mean business, then we should do it not only here, but also in the county charter.
I just disagree. It's a simple change for reporting structure. It fits very well in the county code. And if we want to add it to the charter amendments, which we should be considering many of them, we can do that as well. I'm just trying, because we have a new sheriff coming in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, Mr. Sweeney, in your research and talking with law and staff, have you, has it been brought to your attention that reporting to somebody other than the executive has been a problem for past sheriffs? Because every time they resign, they just say like, hey, thanks, here's my 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, I love you, Armin, goodbye. There's really nothing in anything that they say, well, I had an issue with it. None of them speak. They're like,
I'm just going
former
with
Browns coaches. You don't
Stop
hear from
it.
them ever again. No, seriously.
No, I was laughing.
No,
I'm trying to keep it serious at the same. And let me keep going back. It's from my first hearing. And when they said it reports to the director of safety, we had issues with that. We had even issues with the reporting to it was silent on reporting to the chair or the executive. I'm going to keep going back to the simple thought process of identifying very specifically who the sheriff reports to, because it was all over the place in that hearing. And then Sheriff Violin brings it up. I know he's old. He's out of it. We shouldn't take any consideration with Councilman or Prosecutor Mason. He is a bunch of value, but he's not here anymore. This is a question that we have to ask ourselves. And all I'm doing is crafting a piece of legislation. The council president put it on the agenda and assigned it to the public safety, and the chairman was nice enough to add it to the agenda, and we're having this discussion now. And in my eyes, why not do it? And there's no really downside to it.
Mr. Chair. Okay, we keep going back to the video and how everybody was outraged, but the sheriff reported to the executive office. So that's what the charter says. So people, when we keep going back to violence interpretation of whether it was the director or the executive himself, I don't know why you were outraged by that, but maybe it was just
I
violence
wasn't. I was
response.
brand new. I had no idea.
Okay, so
thought it was
that
a
really
bad
has
answer.
this video has no relevance today at all. It's a former sheriff's interpretation of whether the sheriff said he reported to a director under the executive. Why is that relevant, Mr. Sweeney?
Mr. Chairman,
Why was that relevant?
can I do the
Yes.
proper protocol to say, Mr.
chair.
Chairman, to
Yes.
my distinguished colleague from
I
District
don't
11?
use platitudes. I don't use platitudes. It's unnecessary.
I do Robert's rules,
I
big
know.
respect for each and every one of you.
Platitudes.
Come on, gang. If you would answer, and then I think we're going to wrap up here. I have an idea.
Okay. What was your question again?
Given that Sheriff Island stated that he reported to the executive office, which is what the charter says, the supervisor of the sheriff is the executive, why did you feel a need to bring this before us if this is redundant? Because what you want to say is the sheriff reports to the executive office, and that's what Sheriff Violin said he reported to.
And the very relevant video that I'm showing today showed that a majority of our council colleagues didn't like that.
They didn't like, through the chair, to my extinguished colleague Sweeney.
Thanks for the
So
platitude.
you're saying that because you were on a Zoom call when you were first appointed to your position or elected, I think elected at that point, so you found outrage from your former colleagues on a Zoom call that that Sheriff Violin was reporting to the executive office. So therefore, you want to bring legislation? Yes, you said
I
there
have a
was
different
outrage on a Zoom
interpretation of
call
that.
from your colleagues that they were outraged that Sheriff Violin, former Sheriff Violin, said he reported to the director of the executive office. That's why you're bringing that before us. This is what I keep hearing, and you showed a video. So your answer to that outrage is to have language saying that the sheriff reports to the executive office, which is exactly what Sheriff Violin said he did, which somehow spurred outrage.
It exactly did what.
I think.
Did you watch the whole video recently?
I just watched it. You're saying that people are
hour and a
outraged.
half
No, so
long.
there's no answer. The answer is.
You're going
that
to tell me
you-
my answer? That's fun.
Well, answer it.
Okay.
Answer the question.
Okay,
So
here-
other than your colleague's outrage on a Zoom call,
I just want clarification through my chairman to my colleague on who the sheriff reports to. And for the past 2 years, I have not been able to get that answer.
well,
Very
we're getting it
specifically.
today. Specifically,
ask.
the supervisor is the executive.
Supervisor
And Mr.
and report to are two
Right.
different definitions.
Okay, well, Mr.
Here's
Chair,
where-
I will be a no vote on
Here's
this.
where I
And
think-
if we're doing this, it has to be for all departments.
Hold on. Here's where I think we're at. At the starting blocks.
Ready?
Under section 501 on appointments, it's a broad brush, but it's those appointed by the county executive, subject confirmation by the council, shall serve at the pleasure of the county executive. Now, that was somewhat removed with the new charter change under the sheriff, which kind of muddied the waters a bit, in your opinion. The rest of us, and don't use the violent thing as an example, and I'll tell you why. And I don't know this, but I would bet a lot of money that in their confirmation hearings, Reed, Bova, Pinckney, Schilling, other than Violent, all said that they answered to the executive. And I'll have that researched.
You don't have to. I believe it.
But I'm sure that they would, because this wasn't, we really weren't in the world of confusion that we became involved in.
The world of confusion.
Because of.
That's what I'm
because
trying
of
to,
this. And,
out of
so-
confusion.
I think what we need to do is have further discussions.
I appreciate
and-
that.
And kind of mold this a little bit better. If I were going to, as is, I don't think it's necessary, but if we're going to add language,
Mm-hmm.
I think we should involve all directors, because under the charter, in essence, the sheriff's no different than a director. They're all directors.
Because we have the ability to, I'm repeating myself, you heard what I said.
I
We have
understand
the
that.
ability to remove the,
But
we have a
your con-
responsibility to
but
remove,
your
like
con-
only one
understand.
other entity.
I understand that, but your concern is who you're worried about the reporting.
I just want to know,
For a
our
report.
job is to determine, remove the sheriff for cause with one public hearing.
And Mr. Chair,
That's what our charter amendment says. And
But your concern is who he reports to.
the sheriff could report to nobody. He could say, I'm locking out the county executive because I am sheriff, I am autonomous, I got my council members all in favor of this, and I can report to you, Mr. Gallagher, because you're the chairman of this committee. And that is a reality. That could actually happen. Because a sheriff, and if we don't want to fire him, he could do whatever he wants as long as he has 4 council members that agree with him.
Well, as long as Section 501 exists, he can't do that.
Oh, yeah, you can. I
No,
disagree
he
with you.
cannot.
How?
Because each of the officers provided for in this article shall be appointed by the county executive, subject to the confirmation by the council. And the only thing that's different, and it's not mentioned in Article 16, but Article 16 doesn't exclude Article 5. Article 5 still exists.
I know. I
And the
told you that.
sheriff is still a director. And Article 5 basically says that all directors shall shall serve at the pleasure of the county executive. The change of that was you needed 8 council people to remove. So I think you're hung up on removal.
Right.
I thought we were here for who he answers to.
Mr. Chairman, I can explain something real quick.
They're connected, absolutely, without a doubt.
To Mr. Sweeney, I think with respect to removal by council, I just view that as a councilmatic oversight of an agency.
Then he should report to us.
No, that doesn't,
That's my thoughts, though.
they report to the executive. I mean, we're not gonna.
Then we just passed the legislation.
We're-
I'll be
we're-
more than happy to continue the
We have
dialogue.
separation of powers for a reason, and the executive has the authority, to appoint, and the sheriff works at the behest of the county executive. I mean, that's,
And if the behest of the county executive.
And I suppose
so
we
he
put
should
one
be able
line
to
in there, that'll
terminate.
change.
Behest means at the will, and will means that the executive could fire him, and he doesn't have that authority anymore because of the charter amendment that was passed overwhelmingly by the people of Cuyahoga County, voted for by 10 of
yes,
these,
and
10 of my.
it is a
10
protective
council
measure
people.
to create greater autonomy within the office of sheriff, because.
That's good. I'm happy with that.
It needs it. It's, hey, this isn't the public works director. I mean, this is the sheriff's office, and,
And I don't think.
we need that.
And I don't believe the definition of the sheriff is a director. I think it's a separate entity that reports, because the
Now,
directors.
he's an officer,
Yeah,
and under Section 5, it applies.
okay.
It does not, I don't think 16 excludes 5.
I don't have.
The only
Yeah.
thing 16 does is, in a roundabout way, try to get to the autonomy of the sheriff being comfortable enough to do what the sheriff needs to do and be not subject to the thumb of the executive.
Under my thumb. I'm very thankful that you gave me the opportunity to talk.
I mean,
and
well, what do you want to do with this?
if you want to continue the dialogue, I'd be more than
I
happy
would
to.
prefer to do that because right now.
Absolutely. You don't have to say another word.
I think he's a director. I think if we're going to single out the executive, we should put all the directors under.
That's the will of this council. That's the beauty of 11 members
it's-
elected, 6 votes gets whatever
That's
we
just my
decide.
thought.
I'm good with it.
That's-
Or 8 in a charter amendment.
so.
And a couple other things with 8.
All right, we'll hold this, and if you want to discuss this further, we can discuss this further.
I look forward to sitting with my chairman and.
I'll get some answers that I have questions about, and anybody else have any more input on this?
No more videos.
No more?
I want to
Sheriff
thank
Island.
the administration for putting up with this
That's all
dialogue.
right, that's why we're here.
And all the viewing audience and sheriff,
And
I just want to say hi.
Good discussion had. Councilman, thank you. We'll keep it in committee. We'll keep it alive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we'll see where we can go from here.
I'm going to get my hat.
Okay. Is there any miscellaneous business? Get your blood going on a Tuesday. That's good. All right.